After 21 years together, my alpha chose a younger she-wolf. Then the pack discovered my true bloodline. Ilara stood at the edge of the gathering circle, her hands folded in front of her, watching the firelight dance across the faces of the Ashwood pack. 21 years. That was how long she had stood beside Kale, first as his chosen mate, then as his wife in every way that mattered. She had healed the wounded after every battle. She had raised 2 strong sons who would one day lead this pack. She had given her whole life to this place, this family, this man. And yet tonight, something felt wrong. She could feel it in the way the elders avoided her eyes. She could feel it in the way Kale stood a little too close to the new she-wolf who had arrived 3 months ago. Sable was young, with sleek dark fur and confidence that filled every room she entered. She had come from a neighboring territory, claiming to seek shelter after her own pack disbanded. Kale had welcomed her with open arms, perhaps too open. Ilara told herself she was imagining things. 21 years built a foundation that nothing could shake. But foundations, she would soon learn, could crumble in a single night. Kale called the pack to order, raising his hand for silence. The murmuring crowd quieted, all eyes turning toward their alpha. Ilara stepped forward, expecting him to begin the renewal ceremony, the ritual that marked another year of their bond. It was tradition, something done every year without fail. Instead, Kale cleared his throat and looked away from her. "I have been thinking about the future of this pack," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "About what is best for all of us. 21 years is a long time. Loyalty matters, but so does the strength of the bloodline we pass to the next generation." Ilara felt her stomach tighten. Something was coming, something she would not be able to stop. "I have decided to reconsider the succession line," Kale continued, "and I want to introduce someone who may have a role in shaping our pack's future." He turned and gestured toward Sable, who stepped into the firelight with a small, knowing smile. The crowd gasped. Ilara's sons, Bren and Tomas, stood near the front, their faces frozen in shock and anger. Ilara herself said nothing. She could not find her voice. 21 years of devotion, and this was how it ended. Not with a private conversation, not with honesty, but with public humiliation in front of the entire pack. Sable did not even try to hide her satisfaction. She lifted her chin and looked at Ilara with something close to pity, though there was no real sympathy behind her eyes. "The alpha deserves a mate who can bring strength to this pack," Sable said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Not just loyalty, but power, real bloodline. We all know Ilara was found as a stray pup at our borders. No family, no history, no strength to offer beyond what little she has given through service." The words cut deep, deeper than Ilara expected. She had heard whispers like this before, quiet comments made behind closed doors over the years. But she had always pushed them aside, telling herself that her place in the pack was earned through her actions, not her bloodline. Now, standing in front of everyone, she realized how fragile that belief had been. She turned without a word and walked away from the fire, her steps steady despite the storm inside her. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not here, not now. Her sons found her later that night in the healing den, the small wooden building where she spent most of her days treating the sick and injured of the pack. Bren, the elder son, paced back and forth with barely contained fury. "He cannot do this," Bren said. 21 years, mother. 21 years, and he treats you like this in front of everyone?" Tomas, quieter than his brother, sat beside Ilara and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We will not let this stand. We can challenge him. We can speak to the elders." Ilara shook her head slowly. "No, I will not have either of you risk your place in this pack by fighting a battle that is mine to face. Your father has made his choice. I will not beg him to change it." But even as she said the words, she felt something stirring inside her, something she could not quite name. It was not just sadness, it was something closer to clarity, as if a fog she had lived inside for years was finally beginning to lift. The days that followed were difficult. Sable grew bolder, walking through the pack grounds as though she already held the position of Alpha's mate. She made comments within earshot of Ilara, calling her weak, calling her a burden the pack had carried out of pity rather than respect. Kale said nothing to stop her. Whether out of cowardice or genuine agreement, Ilara could not tell, and at this point, she was not sure it mattered. Ilara continued her work in the healing den, tending to the sick, preparing herbs, stitching wounds. It was the one place where she still felt like herself, where her worth was never questioned. The pack needed her skills, even if some had begun to forget her value as a person. Then, on a quiet afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after the gathering, everything changed. A messenger arrived at the pack borders, requesting an audience with the Alpha. He came from the North Fang Pack, a powerful and ancient group whose territory bordered Ashwood to the north. Relations between the two packs had always been respectful but distant, built on careful treaties that prevented conflict over shared hunting grounds. Kale called his most trusted wolves to the meeting hall to receive the emissary, a tall, gray-furred wolf named Castor, who carried himself with quiet authority. Ilara was asked to attend as well, since healing matters and trade often intersected with these negotiations. She arrived late, having finished treating a young pup's injured leg, and slipped quietly into the back of the hall. The moment Castor caught her scent, everything stopped. He turned slowly, his eyes widening as he stared at Ilara across the room. The other wolves fell silent, confused by his sudden reaction. Castor took several steps forward, his nose lifting slightly, as though confirming something he could hardly believe. Then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he knelt. "Vathorn," he whispered, his voice filled with reverence. "You carry the blood scent of the Vathorn line." Murmurs spread through the hall like wildfire. Kale rose from his seat, his expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What are you talking about? Explain yourself." Castor rose to his feet, though he kept his eyes respectfully lowered toward Ilara. The Vathorn line was one of the oldest and most respected bloodlines among the wolf packs of the old territories. They were known for their wisdom, their healing abilities, and their fairness in leadership. Many packs, including my own, owe debts of honor to families of that bloodline from generations past. He paused, studying Ilara carefully. But the Vathorn line was thought to be extinct. There was a conflict, decades ago, when rival packs sought to eliminate them out of fear of their influence. It was said that no survivors remained. Ilara felt the room spinning slightly around her. She had no memories of her early life before arriving at the Ashwood borders as an infant. The pack had always told her the same simple story. She had been found alone, with no trace of where she came from, no scent trail to follow, no family to claim her. She had carried the quiet shame of that abandonment for her entire life, believing it meant she came from nothing. "How can you be certain?" Kale asked, his voice tight. Castor stepped closer to Ilara, his eyes searching her face. "The blood scent of the Vathorn line is unmistakable to those trained to recognize it. It is something that cannot be faked or mistaken. I have studied the old records of my pack's history since I was young. This is not a guess. This is certainty." He turned back to address the gathered wolves. "If this is true, then Ilara is not simply a stray taken in out of charity. She is the last known survivor of one of the most respected bloodlines in our shared history. Her presence here, under the protection of Ashwood, would be seen as an honor by many packs, including my own." The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. Ilara herself could hardly process what she was hearing. The shame she had carried for over 2 decades, the quiet belief that she was unworthy, unwanted, without value beyond what she could offer through service, all of it began to crumble in an instant. She thought back to fragments of memory she had never understood, faint impressions from her earliest years that she had always dismissed as dreams. A warm voice singing softly, the feeling of being carried swiftly through tall grass at night, a sense of urgency and worry that she had never been able to explain. Perhaps these were not dreams at all, but the last memories of a family who had given everything to keep her safe. Castor explained further that infants of noble bloodlines were sometimes hidden during times of conflict, carried far from their home territories, and left where they might be found and protected by unsuspecting packs. It was a desperate measure, used only when survival depended on complete secrecy, even from the child herself. Kale stood frozen, the weight of his recent decisions pressing down on him. The pack he led now stood in the presence of a bloodline considered sacred among many of the old territories, a bloodline he had publicly humiliated and dismissed just weeks earlier in favor of a younger, ambitious newcomer. Sable, who had been standing near the front of the hall, suddenly looked far less confident than she had moments before. Her earlier words, calling Ilara weak and without history, echoed uncomfortably in the silence of the hall. Among many of the old packs, including Northfang, insulting a member of a respected bloodline was considered a serious offense, one that could damage relationships between territories for generations. Kale approached Ilara slowly, his earlier arrogance replaced by something closer to desperation. Ilara, I did not know. If I had known, things would have been different. We can fix this. We can renew our bond, properly this time, with the respect you deserve. Ilara looked at him for a long moment, studying the man she had loved and supported for 21 years. She thought about all the nights she had stayed by his side through difficult decisions, all the times she had quietly stepped back to let him shine as leader, while she worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She thought about the humiliation she had endured just weeks earlier, watching him consider replacing her without a second thought. "You did not value me when you believed I was simply a stray," she said quietly, her voice steady and calm. "Now you wish to value me because of a bloodline I did not even know I carried. But Kale, my worth was never tied to where I came from. It was tied to who I am, what I have given to this pack, and how I have lived my life. You failed to see that before, and I am not certain that discovering my bloodline changes the truth of what happened between us." Kale opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The hall remained silent, every wolf present hanging on Ilara's next words. "I do not wish to renew our bond," she continued. "Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I spent 21 years believing my place beside you was something I needed to earn every single day. I will not spend the rest of my life feeling that way again." She turned to address the gathered pack, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Whatever this bloodline means, whatever history it carries, I choose to use it, not to claim power for myself, but to ensure my sons, Bren and Tomas, are recognized and respected as they continue to serve this pack faithfully. They have shown loyalty, strength, and fairness throughout their lives. They deserve to be seen for who they are, just as I now ask to be seen for who I have always been." Castor bowed his head respectfully. "Northfang will honor this declaration. We will watch closely how Ashwood treats those of Vathorn blood from this day forward." It was a quiet warning, but a clear one. Kale understood that his authority, his standing among neighboring packs, now depended partly on how he treated Ilara and her sons moving forward. His earlier carelessness had consequences that would follow him for years to come. Sable, sensing the shift in power and respect within the hall, quietly excused herself, her earlier confidence completely gone. Within weeks, she would leave Ashwood territory entirely, unable to recover the standing she had once enjoyed. Ilara returned to her healing den that evening, her sons walking proudly beside her. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten, a quiet, steady sense of her own worth, not given to her by Kale, not granted to her by a bloodline she had only just discovered, but something she had carried within herself all along. As the sun set over the Ashwood territory, Ilara walked along the familiar borders alone, the cool evening air brushing against her fur. She was no longer simply the Alpha's mate, no longer defined by her relationship to Kale, or her place within his shadow. She was Ilara, healer, mother, and now, a daughter of the Vathorn line. But more than anything, she was finally, completely herself.